right, well, let's go ahead and get back started. Our last panel of the day, which is kind of our summative panel, is on the topic of AI and human flourishing. And the concept of human flourishing is really an important concept. It's related to the Charlie Institute's theme. You'll see it in the mission statement. So, again, all of the stuff that we've talked about today, relates to the other key themes of the Charlie Institute, such as institutions, policy, again, causing growth, facilitating, business, international communications, and so forth. But again, kind of, at the end here, we really want to think about how does AI, or how could AI maybe better make things better? How does it improve the human condition? How does it make it so humans flourish? And so that is the panel that we now have. I'll go ahead and introduce our panelists here. Our first panelist, who is serving on his second panel, so many of you already know him, is Todd Pringle. Todd Pringle is a lifelong student of technology and culture. He is an advanced engineering manager for John Deere. His team of technology experts focuses on advanced human-machine interaction, perception solutions, advanced algorithms, and electrification. Todd is also a partner in the 701 Fund, a seed stage venture fund focusing on technology startups from the region. He has been the co-founder and CEO of 2 technology startups, successfully developing, patenting, and licensing outdoor products, coatings, and surface distinction technology. He holds a BS in electrical engineering, an MS in polymers and coatings science, and a PhD in materials and nanotechnology, all from NDSU. He's also a part-time academic teaching industrial, and I'm not sure what the O is in this one, organizational psychology. I was thinking it was not input and output. That's the other IO from a computer side at NDSU, while pursuing his second PhD, focusing on the crossover of gene, culture, co-evaluation, collective cognition, and personality. Our second panelist, continuing down the road this direction, is Elsa Bernard. Elsa is a Fargo native and a sophomore at NDSU studying management information systems. She was recently elected president of the Women in Cybersecurity NDSU chapter. For the past year, Elsa has also been working at the Institute for Cybersecurity Education and Research as an undergraduate research assistant, aiming to expand and promote the new frontiers of technology at her university. Finally, on the end closest to me is Anthony Defoe. Anthony is currently a second-year undergraduate student at NDSU, majoring in computer science with a focus on software engineering. Alongside his academic pursuits, he leads a cybersecurity research team at the NDSU Cybersecurity Institute. His aspirations extend to graduate school, where he aims to acquire a graduate degree in computer science. His ultimate goal is to carve out a career path in software engineering, where he can leverage his expertise to make meaningful contributions to the ever-evolving tech landscape. So I'll go ahead and start with a quick pop quiz for the with a quick question for the panel. What is your interest in AI, and how do you think it can improve society? So just a small question to begin with.
Right. Well, beyond just helping with homework now, I don't know. It has quite the capacity to improve mundane tasks and to mitigate the amount of time we spend on things that we probably shouldn't be spending a lot of time on. Like, I write a lot of emails, so it's and I probably stress a little bit too much over how I'm writing each email. But you could use AI to help you write emails and just really mitigating those mundane tasks that don't need to be too complicated. At least that's like the most obvious answer that I can think of. But yeah.
Yeah, so like Anthony, I'm a student and I come from a cyber perspective, so I'm not super highly educated or in the field of AI, but in my personal life, I've noticed that AI is able to streamline a lot of processes, like in homework and in like academic work, things like that, or just everyday tasks like writing emails.
That's a question, and I have to be very careful of not getting carried away on the second half of that answer. So the first part, what is my interest? I was interested in the human condition, and this is an interesting crossover between really tech and what it means to have a brain. This is challenging the notions of what is intelligence. We're also discovering strange things about ourselves. in the sense that how much are we also predictive machines kind of running our own large language models? To what extent do these artificial intelligence models, to what extent are they analogies to how our brains work, and to what extent are they different? There's ways that they appear to be very similar in terms of predictive coding, predictive processing, but then ultimately we have no basis to think at this point that anything that we've created has any kind of affect, subjective experience, consciousness, all these sort of things that make us fundamentally human. Yet, we have feelings, we have subjective experience. We each can understand what the experience of the color orange is, even though none of us can share it. But at the same time, we run these construal engines in our head, making up stories for things, often where we don't know how they're going to end. But that's a hell of a lot like these large language models. So it's a very fascinating both lens and contrast to how we think. And so that's one of the main drivers for me. And then I've always been keen on where tech is heading. And then for my work at John Deere, my team is sort of steeped in this space. And for your second question, so what is its impact? I'll punt for now, so I don't have the mic for 20 minutes.
Excellent. Well, some great thoughts there. So I have a question here in two parts. The first part is for you guys on, I guess, the right side of the stage from my perspective, the left side of the stage from those watching's perspective. The second part is for Todd on the right side of the stage from everybody else's perspective, left side on mine.
I'm confused.
We'll label the parts of the question appropriately. So Elsa and Anthony, as you're thinking, preparing to go out into a very changing world, right? I mean, it has been quite some time since people have said, here's a technology that again, some pundits are saying may make it so there's no work left to do at all, and probably we're not anywhere near that, and it's going to be some time. So the first part of the question is does that concern you? And if so, why? Or if not, why not? And I guess the corollary for this, I guess, to Todd, is, thinking about the jobs of the people that you oversee, do you see AI as a short-term risk to any of those positions or anything else that you're familiar with actually in the workforce right now? And again, kind of that why or why not. So whoever would like to start.
Well, as far as AI taking, my job goes, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. And maybe, sooner than later, it'll help in the capacity of, like I was saying before, mitigating the smaller mundane jobs. But as far as like generating original thought and, solving these complex problems where you would have to, spend just an equal amount of time explaining the problem to the large language model and, and really specify like, okay, I need this and this and this and this for the output. By that time, I feel like you could have gotten a great start just to doing it yourself. And then, you know how it works, you built it. And I think until, AI could like just, you have to have some way just like, oh, here's the problem, and they could like figure it out what you need. But without specifying that, I don't think it could really, solve all those problems like just like immediately. But I definitely could see it like helping with like just small like individual tasks. But I don't think the only job left is going to be an AI engineer.
I think for me personally, the fear was kind of real. Getting into college and into the professional world, you start to see within the past couple of years, more of the use of like ChatGPT and other AI technologies that start to become a part of daily life. And you start to realize this is a skill set that I need to start adapting. So my thought process when picking my major was, well, if I can't beat the automation, if I can't beat them, I'm going to join them. So that kind of influenced my decision to major in MIS and study cybersecurity. Was your thought process similar?
Well, not really. I knew I wanted to do computer science and software from, a good early point in my life. I think I was like in middle school.
Yeah.
I always just like making things. And I think like for ChatGPT, for example, it has great potential to generate good ideas, but not, original new ideas.
Right.
And that's kind of where I want to be. I want the new original ideas. Yeah.
So to answer your question about, impacts, at least relating to, where I work, what my team does, really no short-term threat whatsoever, because if you're working on embedded systems, or if you're working on the edge of something, you're trying to maximize what it takes to run a YouTube video on your cell phone requires not just the ability to write code, but actually to understand the circuits underneath that, to understand what the constraints of the hardware are, and how you can maximize the hardware and the software together to get like a maximum throughput of number crunching so that you can render stuff on a screen. That's hard. And that skill set is pretty complicated, because those systems are pretty complex. These tools, as they exist right now, are zero threat to people working in that space. They're productivity enhancers, potentially. Front-end development, the UX of an app, the basic functionality of how you'd like an app to work. Near term, potentially something that can replace front-end developers to a point. The secure area for now is the further you go down that tech stack, further you get to what people might call the back end, or closer to the board level, the more you have to take into account the hardware itself when you're writing your code. We seem to be quite a ways away from that. Here's the kicker. The acceleration is happening. Well, it's accelerating, which is to say its progression is speeding up. And just in watching both these, chatbots, as well as the the image generation capabilities, it feels like it's moving on a daily basis for improvement. What would 3 years look like right now? So trying to look at the short version of this, we have all experienced, say, GPT 3.5 or GPT-4, and you've probably experienced lots of hallucinations. You could ask it to write an extended paragraph of a research paper and cite articles, and it will do that. And most of those articles will be hallucinated. There'll be things that it looks like that's a right journal. It looks like that's an author and all that stuff. But you really don't know until you check whether that's true. And so people are like, woof, oh, good. It's not going to be writing journal articles for me. But that's stage one. It's just an LLM looking at the prediction for the next word, and then it gets its word, and then it loops it again for what's the next word, and then what's the next word, all based on what would probably be the highest likelihood next thing. So it hallucinates things that seem like they would be the next word. But if you put an overlay on top of that, I mean, you scrape Google Scholar and you have a big table of actual articles, and then you put another recursive loop in the way you architect the program. So you have the thing make your article, and it's hallucinated a bunch of sources that don't exist, and then you have it, before it outputs to you, check against actual articles, discover that it's wrong. That's with a prompt you've already pre-developed, and you can even theoretically sort of stay within the LLM with, you've got another piece of code that's now interacting with your LLM, forcing it to do things and correct things and to check against things. And some of those algorithmically aren't that complicated. I don't write code, and I'm in danger of really being the BS versus expertise here is thin. But my understanding is the challenge to take an LLM and add to it a framework that has it essentially look up if these articles are real, and then recursively fix itself until it matches. Isn't that hard? And in fact, people have already put out their own versions of research-based AI. So the speed by which what appears to be like fundamental limitations of these things, the speed by which people are figuring out how to add stuff on top of that to sort of self-correct and adjust is amazing. So to me, 3 years out, for front-end development at least, all bets are off.
Excellent. Do we have any questions from the audience here in the room? We have a few more on the chat as well, but anybody in the room that has a question? If not, we'll jump to one from the chat. The person in the chat asks that creative thinking is one of the lowest core skills amongst all levels of employees, and most organizations don't know how to deal with this. How does AI complement or complicate this matter?
The first part, it's the lowest.
That creative thinking is one of the lowest core skills amongst all levels of employees.
If the person is trying to say that most people don't have creativity as one of their core skills, or do we think the person's asking most companies don't value creativity as a core skill?
I took it as creativity was lacking amongst employees, and companies were having difficulty figuring out how to resolve that problem of a lack of creativity.
To me, I think it's a boon. It's absolutely a wonderful thing to unstick your brain. The problem is often not lack of ideas. The problem is usually vetting the right idea. You know, you get these, you see this company bought this other company for $1 billion, and you think, and there's always going to be somebody in that bigger company who had that idea. Like, oh, you know, they just don't listen to me. They have to go outside. The reality is there's 100 other people within that big company that had sort of similar ideas. And you had to wait for the market to figure out which one of those is a good idea, because it's super, super complex. So you let the startup world and that sort of thing to discover that for you. So getting sources of ideas is not usually the problem. That said, the generative capability of AI is amazing for storming, coming up with all sorts of ideas. What are the top 10 criteria? What are the panel topics we should have for this AI discussion? You ask an LLM to do it and say, give me 10 of them. They might be 10 bad ones, but what that does is get everything moving, gets the, oh, and not that, but it gets all the associative processes. To me, from having a wellspring of great ideas, it's absolutely fantastic.
I would love to hear a response from Todd on some of my thoughts on this. But I almost fear a little bit that these creative skills are something that is going to diminish over time with the rise of AI. At the previous panel last year, we talked about how a lot of big tech CEOs are putting their children in Montessori schools where they don't have access to technology and they have wooden toys to play with, so that they're able to develop that creative thinking. I fear that, when we place kids in front of screens or we give things to think for them, are they going to lose the ability to, have imagination and be able to create things with their hands? And this is probably a perspective lacking a little bit more clarity on where the future of things are moving. But I would love to hear from Todd, like what you think on that.
So, at one level, I agree with you, but I think when people talk about this, imagination, use your imagination. We need to teach creative thinking, that sort of thing. When you go one layer down, it's often harder to know exactly what should we be teaching. There's a lot of individual differences, and openness is one of like the big 5 personality dimensions. And some people are just ridiculously open. They're just born that way. They're just super associative, chasing squirrels. Everything reminds them of something else, and they're their own hyper-generative person. They'll always give you 20 more ideas and 20 more ideas. Most of them are junk, but it doesn't matter. They can spit them out, and there's a good gem. You don't need a lot of those people. You need to know how to utilize them, and these generative tools are sort of that on steroids. And if we know how to tap into it, that's great. I struggle with the narrative of teaching kids creativity, and all 3 of my children went through the Montessori school. It's a great program. Some people are going to be really open and some people are going to not be open. That's neither good nor bad. You need both in a functioning society. The people that aren't very open are I like the way we do things. I think in a way where the tried and true has a reason for existing. Let's not just throw that away. And it's in that back and forth within a group between the people that are wanting to do the new thing, that are maybe hyper novelty chasing, always come up with something new, never want to do the old thing. and the people that are stuck because this works, and the people in between. It's in that discourse that we have good collective intelligence. So I don't know is the answer in terms of how, my opinion on what these new tools are going to do to us as a society, to that existing diversity and openness, and whether it's going to push us all to be not open. I don't think so, because people with high openness, you can usually test this stuff pretty early. People with relatively low openness, you can test it pretty early. And if you're really highly open and you got these ridiculous generative tools, we're talking about making your own movies, that's coming. The speed by which people have gone from here's a kitty cat, to here's a cat in the street chasing a ball, to here's a short little scene of the kitty cat chasing the ball, and it's moving. Just today in my LinkedIn feed, and I was showing it to Kurt over there. You can take there's a tool out that you can take your Midjourney still and just highlight. So it was a still of a bird in a background. You just highlight the bird and then click the button, and now the bird starts moving. I mean, the ease by which this stuff is becoming available, we're gonna be able to make our own storyboards, make your own movies. I really liked Avatar, but I really like a plot twist in the end, and I really like army tanks. So I'm gonna make that. So highly open people, I think, are going to leverage the crap out of these tools, and people that aren't very open are not. I'm not sure if that's a net bad or good, but it is going to scale the differences we already have.
Right. It seems like our perception of creativity is going to change as AI continues to evolve.
Yeah, and as far as like the software development, side of this, I was having a great conversation with Jeremy a few weeks back about this, where software, like knowing how to write code is going to become like a secondary or tertiary skill, very soon. But at the very core of what we're doing here is problem solving. And, when people realize that they don't need to know, learn how to code as well as they might have used to, I hope the hope is that they more focus on actually developing these problem solving skills to solve these big problems with the help of AI. And I think that's really what the goal should be.
Excellent. Well, we have another question from online, but before we go to that, is there anybody that has a question in the room that they would like to ask? Looks like we have.
Thanks. Here's what I think the challenge is, and I'd like to hear what you think about this. Through a series of advances in our history, the Industrial Revolution, the gas-powered engine and all that, most of us don't have to do a lick of physical labor anymore to have a good life. And what I've used this ChatGPT, and I think what that's starting to do is eliminate the need for us to be able to think. And I think the challenge is right now, well, I'll tell you, in March, I worked on a book for Community Associations Institute on how homeowners associations could manage special assessments. And ChatGPT was just getting to be pretty prominent then. So one of the chapters that I put in the appendix said, ChatGPT, useful or something to be ignored. And in March, I did a ChatGPT search, and I asked it, give me a 3-page summary of the things that you would need to do as a homeowners association to levy a successful special assessment. And you hit the send button, and the minute you hit the button, it starts typing, and it typed 3 pages that were almost perfect. It didn't, I love the term hallucinate, but it had some things that weren't quite right. And I feel like me and the other people in this room right now are probably in a sweet spot using this stuff, because we still know how to think. We've still been trained to be creative. We can recognize when AI is hallucinating, when it's going off the rails. But I think the challenge is in 10 or 15 years, if people grow up with this, aren't they going to lose the skill to be able to tell? They won't have enough background knowledge to know whether or not the AI response is going off the tracks or not. And that's what I see the challenge. Right now, I think it's a great thing.
No, I think that's a great question. And I think before kicking it over to everybody else, I think one question that has been raised that's an important one is if ChatGPT or other similar systems, whether generative AI or other AI techniques, remove some of the entry level jobs, how do you prepare people for the more advanced jobs where, the company then has to say, well, I'm going to make an investment in having somebody do this over and over and over so they get good at this so they can do the next thing up. It almost becomes kind of like taking a math course where you have to do lots of addition, not necessarily because we necessarily want you to, do this for the rest of your life. Hopefully you'll be using Excel or a calculator for most of your major math, but we can't really teach you how multiplication works very well until you understand how addition works. And, if you start getting into, symbolic math or into calculus or something, you still don't know how addition works, you got a problem. So I guess, what does everybody else think though?
Well, throw a rock at me if I talk too much here. A couple things on what you said. I don't think the concern is people won't have the ability to recognize when there's a hallucination, because it's not going to be very long where there won't be hallucinations, because they'll be layered structures with self checks. And then what is the utility of the human in the loop at all? What is the role of the critical thinking skills of the human, and in people who grow up native to that, what are their critical thinking skills, and are we going to separate to people who really adopt these tools and become ridiculously hyper productive, hyper influential, and people who basically use them as substitutes to think? And be careful not how this will come out, but we grossly overestimate as a species the amount with which we think. We actually regulate each other all the time. When people are doing small talk, in terms of actual information content back and forth, most of that stuff is actually, implicit body language communication that predates language. Oftentimes when, why did you do that? Well, I did it because X and Y. Oftentimes those things are construals, things we sort of make up on the fly. We don't think as often, we don't think it's sort of the independent way very often. And these tools are going to be wonderful substitutes for bringing coherence on things. And it will create potentially a large, possibly majority class of people who have surrogate minds. And what the hell? We're going to go backwards and we're going to go forwards at the same time. And that's going to drive a lot of inequality. And we've got to get our heads around that. And we have to figure out how to raise kids in this environment.
Yeah, I think the very core of it is that if we're looking at it from like a productivity standpoint for, us who are, adults and not having to grow up with this stuff, it's we're thinking about this using AI as like a second mind, right? But, the young people of today, if, I would hope that, it's controlled how much they're using AI tools. But I guess the fear is that they're using AI as like their primary mind. That's the only way they think. And, their first instinct when they're asked to promise, oh, let me go ask ChatGPT. Like I know many students here who get by their classes only because they have access to ChatGPT. And that's a big problem right now, at least in our undergraduate school here. Like we're already seeing symptoms of this, where we're going to have, maybe they'll, scrape by enough to get their degree, but once they get out into the industry, they're big trouble. And so I definitely see that problem getting bigger.
Now, before we move on, is that a new problem, or has ChatGPT just replaced other tools like Chegg and other things that people were using to avoid doing their work before? What do you think?
I will say Chegg, like unless you know like kind of what you're doing, like all those, like let's say for like Calc 2, for example, unless you know, the symbols, what they mean, the notation, and you're looking at a Chegg solution, unless it gives you like a little like number as an answer, you really don't know what's going on. And then by the time you get to your test, you're like, you're not going to be scoring very highly on that. So, it definitely replaces those tools, but it's also way more powerful, I would say.
Yeah. So circling back a little bit to some of the questions asked, I feel like AI is really interesting because not only is it something technical, it's also something philosophical. It's something where we have to question our humanity, which makes it kind of a scary topic. It's becoming polarizing, almost political. I mean, it is political. I feel like we can all sort of understand, and we've all felt this, like shift over, the past century even, but more generally, the past couple of decades, things have become more streamlined. Our cities are less walkable. Our, packaging and our architecture is becoming more minimalist. And I think there's this fear of losing our humanity, which is like the larger fear that we don't talk about as much. So I feel like this is the prime time to figure out where AI fits into humanity and how we can preserve that, how we can preserve our creative processes, our music, our art, and implement that into policy and to our way of doing things.
So we have another question from online that I think might be a short one. This is specifically targeted at you, Elsa and Anthony. How do you, and I think that this comes back to maybe Anthony's comment about emailing earlier, how do you ensure authenticity in your emails, thinking about the impact of using AI to create email communications? If you use AI to write email and AI doesn't have empathy, does this negate the usual process of evaluating how the other person is feeling and what their knowledge level is by word choice that creates the tone and other content of the email? So do either of you have a thought on that, or Todd, do you have a thought on that? Once I guess the questioner asked you guys specifically, so we'll let you start.
Oh yeah, I can start. So at least from my perspective, when I'm writing emails, I'm not too sure about the empathy point, but like I'm not just, putting in the email I want to ChatGPT and just copy paste, boom, send, done. I'm, proofreading. I have to add stuff sometimes, but at least for me when I'm writing, it's hard to get the ball rolling because, I know like the gist of what I want to say, but I just don't know how I should start to say it. And, maybe that's a skill I should, develop a little bit more. But as far as, really getting you want to get the main idea of like what the original goal of why you were sending that email in the first place across. But I don't think that that's too big of an issue, really. Yeah.
Okay.
I personally experienced this the other day, not an email, but I haven't written many cover letters in my life. I'm a sophomore at NDSU, but I was applying for an internship and I needed to write a cover letter. So it's kind of like, what am I doing? How do I make this sound good? So I asked ChatGPT to produce a cover letter based on my LinkedIn profile and my information. So in my approach, I take it as a template. So, I mean, I just looked at it and I tried to personalize it. But I think this is something that educators and the education system needs to speak to, and maybe start including in life skill classes and things of that nature to help us kind of bridge that gap between having something written out for us and then making it personalizable and human.
And Todd, maybe if I can switch the question up for you as someone who I presume has gotten a fair number of cover letters on applications, how do you feel about the automatically generated cover letter?
I don't care because the cover letters you typically see are seldom things you read. Once in a while, you're trying to decide between two people, or you have a reason to go and look. But in the age of GPT-4, where you can make things really precise, I think it's just going to devalue those things that were kind of cover performative. I do want to say one thing to perhaps that questioner, if there's concern that we're going to lose, if people are relying on AI to be part of our frontline correspondence, that we're going to lose empathy. I'm an engineer. I'm a self-identified autistic. If somebody I care about had recently lost a loved one and I have to send an email with condolences, I suck at that. I mean, I really do. And if I go to GPT-4 and explain the situation, it's going to give me actual sentences that are heartfelt, that, like looking through greeting cards, but customized, will do a far better job. They did some things with correspondence with doctors, where they used the LLMs to produce written things for patients on diagnoses. The LLMs were far more empathetic. That's how they were perceived. You know, this is not some cold machine. This is the human corpus. What's being regurgitated, if you like, is what we've said to each other. And if you train it right, if you all you do is go to some 4chan cesspool, you're gonna get that kind of model. If you train it on where we have been acting professionally and empathetically and collaboratively, you're gonna get an aggregate out of that, short of any other prompting. So you're sort of tapping into a kind of collective unconsciousness based upon what we've shared textually, which to me is one of my biggest concerns here is we are building artificial intelligence based upon words we've used, based entirely upon the data compression that we put into our words, and nothing implicit. We have an epidemic of fast and slow suicide right now in the developed world. Fast suicide is exactly what you think. Slow suicide is basically people who kill themselves over 5 or 10 years due to addiction or other things. We have an absolute epidemic of nihilism and hedonism. We're no longer replacing ourselves from a breeding standpoint. Why? And to me, the strongest argument is over the past 500 years, we've gotten more and more and more explicit and not implicit. We've gotten more and more verbal. We've gotten more and more rational, all the way to the deconstruction of absolutely everything. And we've reached a point in our society that if we can't explain it with words, it's not real, or we don't really understand it until we can put words to it. And the world is far more complex than our brains can handle. You have to have an implicit sense of things, but we've discounted that in the Western world, and then we've produced a tremendous amount of media out globally. And so anyone in the developed world right now is not even replacing. We're not even replacing ourselves, and we're killing ourselves. People in developing places, they don't. I mean, generally speaking, people that have hard lives, that are poor, they don't kill themselves. It's a product of trust funds, and this whole nation is a trust fund nation. I'm going somewhere here. AI and its sort of promulgation, infiltration, whatever, it's ubiquitization, is that a word? Is going to make us even more hyper-rational. It's going to make these problems that we have right now with nihilism and hedonism and suicide even worse. We've got to figure this out. We have to figure out what the implicit is. And I would suggest anybody that's a student of history and a student of psychology to read Ian McGilchrist's The Master in His Hemisphere, which talks about the left hemisphere in the brain and in the right hemisphere, and the implicit and the explicit, and how that is played out in society, and put it in the context of AI and the gasoline we just poured on our hyper rational society. I mean, that is short of Shoggoth, short of the doom thing. We're gonna get a monster that's gonna turn us all into paper clips. Short of those sorts of things, my biggest concern with AI is the acceleration of the loss of the implicit.
I think we have 2 questions that I saw, 2 hands
Yeah, Ben,
raised.
do you want to start with the first one?
Well, just off the back of that, let's say that the AI becomes so powerful that it plays the best guitar solo, makes the best margarita, and everything that humans can aspire to is just a parlor trick to this thing, and it just passes us. And let's say it is even geared towards human flourishing, so that in the midst of doing all of that and laying our best abilities to waste, it also just makes a world in which we can live lives of ease and don't have to do anything, 3D printing homes, growing food, etc. In that world, is that possible? Can humans survive in that world? And if we can, what would each of you 3 do to spend your time if you don't have to survive in this world?
Well, in a world where everything's done for you, I think a lot of people, the majority of people would absolutely love that. But I don't know, just kind of movie about that where it's like WALL-E. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, where everyone's just, got their recliner and they don't got to move around anywhere. And, life, they think life's pretty great, but at least as long as there's people that, are aware of what life used to be before, that's a very, at this point, very far-fetched situation. But as long as there's people that are aware of what life used to be, I think there's always going to be people who want an escape, who want to do things for themselves, who want to make their own things. Like, you know, there's a big movement right now where people just want to go live off grid, you know, get some land in Alaska and have their cabin, and they're going to hunt, they're going to fish, and they're going to have their log cabin that's, you know, heated by wood. And that's where they want to spend the rest of their life at. And there's always going to be people who don't want to, you know, conform, even if everything is done for them. And I don't think that's like very sustainable.
My immediate thought was I would lose my mind. I would lose my mind if everything was perfect and automated and done for me. So in my mind, I feel like that's when our utopia starts to turn into something dystopian. And I feel like that's where problems arise. When I think of people saying, you know, the downfall of humanity is AI, I don't think robots are going to come kill us all and going to imprison us or something like that. I start to think when life becomes too easy and, you know, thoughts are thought for us, processes are done for us, that's when we start to become unfulfilled and unsettled. People are going to be searching for meaning. People are going to revolt and rebel. And that's all very far-fetched and very far down the line. But I think that's something that we need to keep in mind, and we need to focus on finding purpose in our lives and finding meaning as these things advance.
100% on that. I mean, we're built for toil. We are primates that have to carry a burden. We're the product of hundreds of millions of years of struggle. And all of our physiology and our neurology is built with that expectation. And if you have a life of luxury, I mean, you can't take a meerkat and give them the life of a Galapagos tortoise. You know, you can't have something that is a highly social, furtive animal, both predator and prey, in a sort of a cutthroat world, and then put them in an area with zero predators and they just chew on leaves all day, and not have that same physiology, that same the same drives, basically cause complete chaos. We're watching it now. We're watching it now because the life of the average American, the life of somebody at the poverty line in America, how much better is that in terms of real worries that you have? And I'm not discounting certain people that have real problems, but on the average, a very poor American lives so much better than all of life's ancestors. And we don't know what to do if we don't have a burden to carry, and it can't be random. Authenticity has to be authentic. You talk about guitar playing. I think we're going to be okay that AI will be able to play better guitars, play better guitar, and make better songs. It will make us appreciate the authentic more. I mean, there's going to be a appreciation for the authentic, but meaning, fulfillment, it comes from struggle, real struggle to do real things. And if we lose that, I mean, then we're truly lost.
Yeah, I have a question about maybe reorienting how we're looking at this to some extent. With AI, we often think of looking in the future, but there's a Maori expression that goes, I walk backwards into the future with my eyes fixed firmly on the past. And I think that's been very much lost in our society and certainly in education. It was rather, our past was sort of deliberately ripped out of education beginning about a century ago. So most of us going through generationally really don't know much about the ancient world, about the history of thought, so on and so forth, or art history over the last throughout three-quarter time. And people who do, when you meet like Dr. McGilchrist, who Todd interviewed recently, you get the sense of the richness of the past and our heritage that I think would help us greatly deal with AI, this next technological revolution, rather than being kind of bereft culturally and with that kind of historical amnesia looking towards the future with these terrifying weapons.
Does anybody?
That's a good comment.
Right. I think we had one more in the middle that has been raising his hand for a bit, Ben, too.
So my question is just like, you guys talk about how we're getting there to a society where it might be already taking care of it for us and we don't have that toil anymore. What makes you think that we're not already there?
We are.
We're getting some
Take,
short
take,
answers. to
take a
questions.
walk under a bridge in a major city and look at people who are addicted to fentanyl. Why? I mean, a fentanyl addiction is a 2-year death sentence. A heroin addiction used to be a 5-year death sentence. People are choosing that option. Why? We are not all there, but as a society, we have the things in place for a good chunk, a large chunk of people, based on however they grew up and their individual differences, to find their life lacks purpose, lacks meaning. And what I'm saying is we're going to accelerate that. And how can the center hold right now? I mean, have we already lost the script? Have we already lost the binding narrative that's holding us together? And I would say we have. But what fraction of our populace checks out before the whole thing falls? And then, I mean, we'll pick ourselves back up, but we, being singular us, might not be a part of that. And there might be hell between now and then. We as a species will fix this. But why do we have to walk through hell? Why can't we actually see it happening and doing something about it? So I think we're there.
Anybody else have a thought?
Happiness puppies.
Yeah, that summed up what my opinion on it is pretty well.
Yeah. Could you reiterate that question? I just didn't quite hear it.
So it was basically saying like, you guys are talking about how AI is going to make everything so much worse. And I was curious on why you guys didn't, well, maybe I was misunderstood, but you guys didn't think it was already here. Because personally, I think it's already here. And I didn't know if there was a way that you could see AI helping us get back other than it just taking us further down that path.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess I agree with what Todd said, and I agree, like, we are there. Not to add more pessimism to the mix, but just kind of along with everything we've been saying, I feel like AI is also sort of feeling that fire we felt as Americans, in this past decade of like political divisiveness and just tension and fear mongering. And I guess I don't have any specific thoughts on that, but I just feel like that's something to keep in mind during this discussion is like the political implications and how this can lead to more extremism on different ends of the spectrum, whether we're in support of AI or not at all.
Well, right, because AI is a double-edged sword, right? Because we can imagine all these like doomsday scenarios. Maybe we're living one right now, but AI has a great capacity to solve real problems that affect real people, and has an amazing capacity to do good. But it's this kind of thing where we just have to, I don't know, I wasn't here for the policy discussion, but really just we have to know what we have to have a vision of where we want to be as a society, because like what Todd was saying, there's already outlets for people who want to slowly kill themselves, and then we look back at history, there's always been ways where people who don't have purpose can just, go into the background and disappear. But yeah, it's the real goal is to have AI be as a tool for good.
Yeah, I'd clarify. I'm more optimistic than I sound.
Mhm.
I mean, historically, Americans, we tend to do really, really stupid things until we get our shit together. We haven't had AI at the time, but we lost our way many times, and we tend to discover it before we fall, and we tend to be highly unified and fix things. And AI could actually be a wonderful tool to help us find the binding narrative that we need. We used to have generally a binding narrative, and it was by that I mean, what are our norms? What's right from wrong? What are we supposed to do? What's acceptable and unacceptable behavior? And we've deconstructed all of that. And we can't simply say, go back to where we were in 1954, because you will only get maybe half the people to agree with you. We have to have a binding narrative that far more than half have to agree to. And AI might help us get there as a way to accelerate our collective intelligence and to put it to words. And I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic, but I want people to understand that the stakes are really high here, and there isn't a guarantee that we don't end up with a couple generations of chaos before we figure this out.
And so, I mean, we've unfortunately, we're actually already 5 minutes over the end of this panel. And I know that there's a few more questions on the audience. There's at least one more in the chat, which I'm going to paraphrase a portion of as kind of our final question to maybe end on a little bit of a high note. So we've talked about the challenges of AI. We've talked about the considerations. We've even talked about how sometimes being happy makes us unhappy, or making things too easy makes things difficult. How do each of you think we could use AI to improve the human condition?
I've talked too much.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. And honestly, I don't really have any, clear points on exactly what we could use AI for to do that. It's a, like our discussion on this panel, we've highlighted ways that, this is AI can make, life so much worse, but it's really like open to, whatever path that we directed. And yeah, I just wish I had some points, but yeah, yeah, but that's kind of what we do as humans. We solve problems. I don't know, and I really don't think that these situations that we described are probable. Maybe that's just being optimistic.
Yeah. One thing I would say is this has the potential to be extraordinarily deflationary. It's the hyper productivity that we could get from these tools could be absolutely exactly what we need at the right time when we have a debt bomb. I mean, the federal debt and all of the other accumulative debt and the debt in the whole developed world, China's ridiculous debt, those are not going to be paid off. They're going to be destroyed, and they're going to be just because you can't pay it off. You destroy them in an inflationary way, hopefully in a way that doesn't get out of control. The only thing that offsets that is legitimate productivity gains. And this has the potential to be a ridiculous productivity gain that could soften the landing substantially if we're smart on policy, and if the tech works the way we hope. We could get out of the current debt situation. Our grandkids could get out of the current debt situation in a way that doesn't require a huge destruction of wealth, which historically is, there's always a leveler comes around to wipe out all the debts, because big debts don't get paid off. To me, that's one of the biggest sort of practical ways that life could get better. The generative capability of this human expression. Imagine you've got a friend group and, hey, I made a movie last weekend. I really think it's good. And you watch it and you have a new way to express yourself. I mean, the potential for that is amazing. Overall, I'm 60% bullish.
Also, you have any?
Yeah, so not only financially, but I also have hopes that environmentally, we will be able to make some strides. So as we approach, that sort of deadline that we have of irreversible damage to our climate and to our atmosphere, I hope that advances in AI are able to help us creatively think and problem solve to create more sustainable products and operations to repair the climate. And I guess to sort of wrap things up, I think as much as it's going to cause a little bit of chaos and uncertainty to think about what AI means in terms of our humanity and the purpose of life, I think that throughout the past century, we've been doing that already. And we've made so many great strides and progressiveness in making life more fair for people and creating more equality. So I feel like this could be another avenue for us to continue to ponder those questions of equity and what makes a good life, and create some more meaning and foster like traditions and human connection. And we'll just see a new frontier in that.
All right, well, thank you. Let's give a quick round of applause to our panel. And that, of course, brings us to the end of our panels for today. I'm glad we didn't end off with the best positive being a discussion of the national debt. That would have been kind of always good when you can end on and something other than a discussion of the national debt. Hopefully this has been useful and this has been informative to everybody today. I think one of the biggest things that hopefully something like this can do is it can help us identify potential pitfalls, identify ways to navigate around them, looking, helping us scan, past the horizon and see, what's out there. We've talked about a ton of different ways that AI can be helpful to people. We talked about how it can be helpful in the professions. We've talked about how we can potentially help it through regulation and what we shouldn't regulate as well, because that creates, potentially problems. And we've ended up today discussing some of the ways that AI can make things better, but also kind of discussing how maybe making things perfect isn't what our actual goal is. I'm reminded when we say this about the phrase, of course, the pursuit of happiness, that is so ingrained in our culture as to really not be something one would cite back to any particular source, right? It's a name of a movie. Recently, of course, it goes back to founding documents of the country. It goes back before that. It goes back, even in different words, in different languages, really as long as human communication has existed. And yet it's the pursuit that we talk about, right? Not actually the goal. And I think that kind of comes back to Todd's point of the fact that we are in fact trying to achieve something. And sometimes it is the pathway, the journey that is perhaps the important part, as more so than even the destination in some cases. That being said, unfortunately, we have reached our destination for today, which is the 3 o'clock end of this panel. So hopefully this journey has been one that has been enjoyable to everybody. Thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you to the Challey Institute for sponsoring this, including arranging this great facility and all of the food that we've had here in the room and all the getting the stuff online. All of these videos, all these panels will be online here in a short period of time, and they'll be right back on the same website where the schedule was. So if you want to go back and watch them, if you missed something, if you want to watch them again, they'll be available for that. And then finally, thanks to everybody that served as a panel, both our final panel and our other 4 panels during the day. And thanks to everybody that attended. Again, hopefully this was something that was valuable and informative. And we hope to see you at doing this again next year, as well as at other Challey Institute events. So thank you very much, everybody.